All right, you guys, so today I'm going to be telling you guys the story about how street photography became my coping mechanism and how it has influenced my life for the past 7 years or so. Ooh, we got a package just in time. Now, this is going to be a different type of video because I mainly never usually share my personal life online, mostly because, being vulnerable and putting it out onto the internet, it's honestly really tough, and I was hesitant to make this video. But then I thought, you know what, if this could somehow somewhere positively impact somebody else, maybe who is going through a tough time, I hope that maybe somebody could learn from my story and maybe not make the same mistakes that I have made. I wanted to answer the question about why. Why do I shoot street photography? Why am I so passionate about it? Even though it's an art form that doesn't have, the most promising return. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it all started back on a hot summer day on July 2nd of 2016, which I considered to be probably, till this day, one of the worst days of my personal life. So in 2016, July 2nd, my father and I had planned to go out fishing. And I remember at that time it was like 11 a.m. and my dad was running super late. I remember I wanted to get out to the lake as early as possible because, it's summertime and it gets super hot during the day. So as this 18-year-old kid, I, didn't really know how to handle my emotions well. I remember I was super annoyed and I started storming towards the door. When I saw my grandmother on the couch, and before I could open the door, she looked at me and she says, "Hey, what's wrong? Like, what's going on?" And regretfully, I looked at her, walked out the door, and slammed it. And little did I know that would be the last thing she would ever say to me. Whew. Yo, shout out to Cinestill. That's a lot of film. An hour later, my mom had called me and she frantically had this panic in her voice and she said, "John, we got into a car accident. We're all going to the hospital right now." And to hear that kind of panic in her voice, I automatically knew that it wasn't good. So my dad and I rushed over to the scene, and upon arrival, my mother's car was completely obliterated. I remember we stormed into the ER. My father and I and my sister had met us up there as well. And as we tried to check in, the clerk said, "Hey, we need to put you guys into this silent room." And immediately after she said that, I had this weird gut feeling that something wasn't right. A couple minutes go by and then a doctor as well as a social worker walk into the silent room. And the doctor looked at us straight into our face, straight into our eyes, and just said, "We regret to inform you that your grandmother, Louisa, did not make it." Within that split second, my sister started screaming, crying, and kicking, letting all of her emotions out, and she's a little bit older than I am, so to see her like that kind of put me into this shock. The entire time I was in that silent room, I didn't even cry or anything like that. I was just completely silent because I didn't know how to take the news of someone that has practically raised me just being gone within an instant. And all I could feel was this sense of guilt and regret for knowing the last time she ever saw me was in that really bad mood. I was like this super annoyed kid who was angry, honestly, for absolutely nothing. We were just going fishing. So they let us into the ER, and when we walked in, there were 3 separate cubicles, I guess you would call them, all with a partition in between. Right dead center in the middle was my mother, and she was silent and crying, and she had the blanket covered up to her neck, just absolutely bawling her eyes out. I've never seen her cry like that before. On the right side was my grandfather, and my grandfather was yelling and, asking my mom "Hey, did your mom die? Is she alive? Where's your mom? Is she okay?" And then my eye immediately looked over to the left, and in that left corner was a dark room, again, still separated just by a curtain. I knew that's where my grandmother was, so I started walking towards there, and right before I could walk into that corner room, my dad had grabbed my shoulder and he says, "Hey, you need to go say goodbye. I'm gonna be right here waiting for you at the door." Whew. So I walked in and there she was, my grandmother who didn't make it. And for the first time in my entire life, that was the only time I've ever felt her cold. I remember going up to her and kissing her on the forehead. And that's when immediately I knew, feeling the cold on my lips, that she was really gone. And the shock wore off, and then the emotions just flooded in like a tsunami. And everything after that was kind of a blur. I remember going home and I slept for what seemed like days. Woo, shout out to Cinestill. So immediately after this incident, I remember falling into like this deep depression. I didn't want to eat. I would just sleep all day. And I couldn't seem to get over the guilt of leaving my grandmother in the way that I did. I just remember withering away like day by day. But it wasn't until my girlfriend at the time, who is my ex-girlfriend now, she would tell me things like, you know, I can't see you like this. You need to pick up a hobby, get your mind off of things. And so she had purchased a film camera for me, and she gifted it to me and told me, let's go out to shoot.
You've been gone.
Oh my goodness. It all started right here. It was 2016. I had just gotten my first film camera. I was 18 years old. Now this right here was the exact pier that I went to with my camera. I shot my first roll of film. I remember loading it up right here on these chairs. You know, with photography, I just wanted to do something. I just needed to keep myself occupied and busy, because the more I sat there, the more I kept thinking about my grandmother, and then that just made me more sad. So I remember taking my camera to the city and I said, you know what, I'm just gonna go out and I'm gonna make photographs.
What's up, Chicken Little? Why you lay like that, bro? Okay. This is Reese. Reese has been with us for over, how old are you? She's like 13 now or something. But anyways, as time went on, I found myself going to San Francisco a lot more and just roaming the streets. And at that time, I had no goal in mind. I was already getting into street photography. I was studying up at home. But street photography became a really good distraction from the endless amount of thoughts that just kept flooding my brain on a daily. So the only time I really think I felt calm and peace was when I was out on the streets with my camera. And so that became very therapeutic for me, and I eventually just stuck with it. And I didn't realize it at that time, but street photography became my coping mechanism. Because anytime something would happen that was either negative or bad, I would grab my camera and revert back to the streets of San Francisco. Because just for that small amount of time, I could break away from the world and just create my art.
What's up, baby? It's good.
Okay, so fast forward to 2018. My grandfather was severely depressed, of course. He had lost the love of his life. I mean, it makes sense. They were together over 50 years. And to lose the love of your life like that, traumatically, I can't imagine, you know, what he was going through. But as a result, his health had completely gone downhill, and he was put on hospice care, which, if you guys don't know, is end of life care. Now, something you guys need to know about Filipino people is that we will do everything we absolutely can to take care of our elders, our loved ones, up until they go. We will never put them into like a care home or anything like that. So of course, I was the youngest of the family, and so I had to take on that responsibility. I quit both of my jobs. I had stopped going to school, and between the hours of 5 a.m. right when I woke up all the way to around 5 p.m., I was the sole caretaker of my grandfather for about a year. What happened, Mom?
The mice, when I'm doing the laundry, right, when I turn around, the mice like, so I'm trying to, I'm trying to catch the mice, and then I saw the mice, they went underneath the bed.
How did you tell Grandpa?
I said to Grandpa, I said, wala uto dito.
One more. Dribble.
Now, during that time, I just remember being so angry at the world. Like, you know, I have to put my life on pause to take care of my grandfather, and my family doesn't want to help me at times when I want to go out. And really, you know, I look at it now and I just think I was thinking of everything from the wrong perspective. If anything, I am really grateful that I was able to take care of my grandfather during that time, because we shared a lot of amazing moments. Like I got to feed him every day, I got to bathe him, I changed his clothes, I helped him out with like doctor visits, nurse visits. And then it wasn't until he was bedridden where it really got a little bit tough for me, because at that time I was starting to make these YouTube videos, and these videos were becoming a little bit more serious for me. And a lot of you guys don't know this, but in those older videos from 2018, if you listen in really closely, hence the reason why I took audio very seriously back then, you could hear my grandfather screaming in the background because maybe he needed help or maybe he needed to get changed. And so while I was taking care of him, I was also trying to build up my YouTube channel. After an entire year, weirdly on their anniversary date, which is kind of crazy, my grandpa had passed, and that of course took a toll on me as well. And what did I do? Well, I reverted back to street photography. This time in a very kind of different way. The first thing that I did was I went on this random splurge on street photography books, because I wanted to study the art form. I wanted to understand some of the history, some of the greats behind it. And I accumulated, I don't know if I can show you guys here, I accumulated a ton of books. Oh my goodness, it is dirty in there, I am sorry, but you know, Bresson, you got Gary Winogrand, Robert Frank, Robert Doisneau, Vivian Maier, all of these really great photographers. I mean, there's more down there as well. And I realized that, hey, I needed to start a color project. All of what I was shooting at that time for some reason was black and white, whether that be because I was influenced by my situation or not. So for about 7 months or so, I set out to the streets of San Francisco 4 days a week from the minute I got to the city all the way until sundown. And I made my first color body of work, which is this right here, Crosswalk. It's funny because Crosswalk seems like a happy body of work, right? Like, I mean, look at this image right here. You know what I'm saying? It looks joyful, it looks cheerful. You know, the balloon across the street. But it's funny because I think at this time, I think I was the most broken I've ever been. I mean, I had put on over 60 to 70 pounds. I was my heaviest at 250 pounds. And I felt like I couldn't really see the light. And the only way for me to be able to cope with that was to kind of put up a front and show that I was happy through a body of work like this. And really, I mean, I was far from happy, you know, I was pretty sad and broken. I've never told this story to anybody before. I've never shared it online, like I said earlier, because it's tough. But that was the intention behind Crosswalk. Now I want to show you guys something really quick here. Let me see. So my family has always had these photo albums that my mom had made over the years. So there's a lot from my childhood, a lot from my sister's childhood. Look at that boy, man. That boy clean. Farm boy rapper. I guess I wanted to be a farm boy rapper back in the day. Well, anyways, so check this out. This is a picture of my mom right here, my grandfather, my grandmother, myself, and then my sister. And this was, God knows how long ago. This was a long time ago. Dude, look how old these images look. That's crazy. And even until this day, even though I am in a much better place mentally, I think I still kind of revert back to street photography anytime I go through something tough. Everyone has their own reasons for why they shoot. What I talked about today is my reasoning. And you know, because it's very therapeutic for me. And this is why I shoot though. I shoot mainly because in a time where I couldn't find any type of like love, I found love out on the streets of San Francisco. And I found love with film photography. I found love with street photography. I found love with the communities that come about out of these art forms. And hey, street photography has always been there for me. And so I almost feel a sense of, hey, I need to contribute back to the art form because it has helped me out in so many different ways. So that's partly why I shoot street photography, ladies and gentlemen. It's mostly because of personal struggles I have faced over the years. But this ties into the school of thought that I firmly believe in, that art is very subjective. Just because you don't think someone else's work is to your liking or to your pleasing doesn't mean that it has to be completely dismissed. I mean, if you make art and you know it makes you happy, regardless of what anyone else says, that's really what matters. From one photographer to another, you know, if you're going through something right now, or maybe you are maybe just a little down on your work, don't worry, it's all gonna be all right. And just stick to it, stick to the craft. You can even rely on it sometimes for therapy. At least that's what I've learned in my case. Yeah, my next body of work is gonna be a photo book, probably gonna come out next year. And in the very first 2 pages, I am planning to write I'm planning to essentially just say like I dedicate this book to my grandparents. Probably just their names, Jose and Luisa. And yeah, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without these two right here. So it's all love, man. And yeah, that's why I shoot street photography. See you guys later.
Tell me, can you hold me down?